Well, welcome everyone to this month's edition of Cabaret Conversations from the 92nd Street Y School of Music. As always, I am your host, Michael Kirk Lane. I am so thrilled to be welcoming for our rescheduled event tonight's guest. He is a Tony nominee who was seen on Broadway in Sweet Charity, Applause, Lorelei, Hello Dolly, 42nd Street, La Cage, Beauty and the Beast, and Producers. He's also a director on Broadway with Carol Channing's last revival of Hello Dolly and also An Evening with Jerry Herman. His cabaret nightclub performances have taken him around the world and to the White House, where he has performed for 4 different presidents. He is the recipient of 2 Bistro Awards and an honorary doctorate from CCM. Please welcome to Cabaret Conversations, Mr. Leroy Reams.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Leroy. I am so thrilled to have you as part of the series for 92Y.
At long last.
At long last, we've had to reschedule due to technical difficulties a couple of times. So third time is the charm, and here we are. I will knock on wood. We don't want to tempt the gremlins to come in during this show, but here we are. Oh. So Leroy, I always like to start for our audience who maybe doesn't know you as well to get some of your background. So let's go back to Kentucky, the Kentucky-Ohio border, and how things started. How did you first find the arts?
I never had to find it. It was just born in me. As a little kid in Covington, Kentucky, I grew up, I was the youngest of 7. My mother had 5, 2 years apart. Then she had a 9-year rest. Then my sister came, and I came 16 months after my sister. So we were surprise children. And as my mother always used to say when people would ask her how many children she had, she would always say, I have 3 boys, 3 girls, and Leroy. And being said, I know what the connotation is, by the way. That's a good one. But it wasn't that. It was just that I was her baby. And I got a lot of attention. And I got a lot of attention from my sisters. And so as a little kid, I would just get up in the middle of the room when there was music on and I would sing and dance. And so my mother, being so intuitive as she was, there was an ad in the local paper that the local dance school, the Jules Stein School of Dance, had an offer. You got a free pair of tap shoes and a promise that your child would be in the recital if you signed up for so many lessons. So I went. Now, Jules Stein did not teach the class. The younger girls taught the children, of which I was one. I was about 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
And the sign outside said, Tap-toe, ballet, acrobatic, baton, ballroom, voice, personality, and culture. And so I went in and took to it like a duck to water. And at the first recital, we did a tap dance to a song called the Johnson Rag. And after that recital, Jules Stein hung himself. He committed suicide. It had nothing to do with me.
Hopefully.
And then the next person in Covington, Kentucky, was a young man named Bobby Ziegler. And he operated a school about a block from our house. So then I went there. And he got drafted into the service. And so his teacher, Alma Tranter, came in and took over his school. And when she saw me, she told my mother that I had it and that she took me out of my class and put me into the advanced class with the older children because she said I belonged there. And she told my mother, she said, I don't tell many parents this, but he's got it. And he can make a living doing this because he's a natural. And that's all that we needed to know. And from that point on, my whole life has been geared to be in show business, preferably Broadway. And so my life has been done that way. So I participated around the cities in all the talent shows, going to do special benefit shows for the local organizations, and then being in all the school plays. So I was definitely going to be an actor. And so I was lucky enough to be living across the river from Cincinnati, Ohio, and that was the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. Now, they weren't CCM was not a college within the university at that time.
Oh,
So I
okay.
had a ballet scholarship to the College Conservatory of Music, and I studied voice and dance there. And I was a theater arts major at the University of Cincinnati. And my junior year, CCM joined the faculty of UC. And
Mm.
then after I graduated a few years later, they installed a musical theater major, which was the first in the United States of America. And the first student in that program was my dear friend, Pamela Myers. And she was the first graduate in America of a musical theater
Wow.
major. How about that?
Wow.
That's how it all happened. And of course, Cincinnati, as a major city, we had a symphony, a ballet company, the Cincinnati Opera. So I performed in all the venues during the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college. I went to Dayton, Ohio to the James Alex Summer Theater and got my equity card. So when I came to New York, and in my junior and senior year, I was president of the Mummers Guild, which was the dramatic organization. And we did a lot of shows, and I directed, choreographed, plus played the
Mm.
lead in so many of them. So I sort of instigated that major at the school. And then I came to New York and I was a working professional. I had my union card. I went to my first audition for the Juliet Prowse nightclub act and got it.
Mhm.
And I was making $400 a week in Las Vegas dancing with Julia Prowse, and the course dancer on Broadway was making $125 a week. And that's how I
Mm.
began. And everything snowballed after that due to Julia Prowse and the choreographers I met, and so on and so forth.
What was it like going right into the nightclub circuit then with Juliet?
And not a thing at all. It's an audience, you know.
Hmm.
It's just more intimate, which is what cabaret is. And that's basically what the stuff was in Las Vegas. I mean, they were the shows, but they were concerts, but they were like working cabaret. That's, you know,
Hmm.
singers and dancers and musicians and things like that.
Because you
So,
were in the ensembles for other nightclub acts. You did Mitzi Gaynor's act as well.
yes, Mitzi Gaynor, who I just saw in LA, who is still with us, God bless her, and is one of the most talented people I've ever worked with in my life. She literally could do it all. She could sing, she could dance, she could act, and she's just an incredible human being with the energy of an army. God bless her.
As you were doing those nightclub acts, what were the things that you think you took away the most about the art form of cabaret and nightclub in those early days of backing up someone else in their acts?
It's the personal instant gratification of having an audience. The same thing in the theater, except it's more casual and more intimate when you do concert work and nightclub acts.
Hmm.
But with Juliet and Mitzi and all that, and then because of the choreographers, Tony Sharmley in particular, who did Juliet's second act that I did with her, had the Danny Kaye TV show, the Danny Kaye show, and I went on that as a dancer. I was primarily a dancer at that point. I did all of the TV shows, the Red Skelton show, the Dean Martin show, the Carol Burnett show, all the musical specials.
Hmm.
I did it off and on for a couple of years, but that's not what I was trained to do. I was having a good time being in LA. I was surrounded by a lot of wonderful choreographers and talented dancers, but it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on Broadway. And so on the Carol Burnett show, Turning Point, we were doing a Jungle Book segment, and Carol was playing Mobley, and Ernie Flatt, the choreographer, who also gave me my first job with Juliet, said, "Leroy, you and Randy Doney and other dancers that are going to be the elephant. Which one front do you want to be, the front or the back?" I said, "Neither." And
Mm.
I talked to him after the day, and I said, Ernie, I studied not to do this. And I've been here too long and I need to go back to New York. So I'm handing in my notice. And
Mm.
I love you. I love you for giving me my work, but I don't want to do this. I'm a singer, I'm an actor, and I want to do Broadway. So I handed in my notice, and as luck would have it, Betsy Gaynor was doing her nightclub act. So her husband convinced me to do the act, but not the whole act. I would just do it up to Lake Tahoe. Then I could leave there and get back to Cincinnati. So
Mm.
I opened her in Lake Tahoe. Then I drove back to Cincinnati, and I helped the university operate a showboat on the river that summer, and I got enough points to get my master's degree. And then I came to New York in the fall, and that's when I started working in, again, television, dancing with Peter Gennaro and all those wonderful choreographers. And then I got an audition for Will Parker to do Oklahoma at Lincoln Center for Richard Rodgers. And it's a good story if you want to hear my audition.
I would love to hear you. I'm not going to turn down a Richard Rodgers story on the show.
Well, here we go. I mean, I was overwhelmed because, first of all, you grow up idolizing Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein and Lorenz Hart and all the people he worked with. And so at my audition, I was told not to sing a Richard Rodgers song because he was very particular about his songs. If you didn't do them correctly, so don't sing a Richard Rodgers song. So me thinking how smart I was going to show him that I was also a singer and not necessarily a dancer. So I decided to sing Leonard Bernstein's Lonely Town, a ballad. And I got about 2 words, and he yelled, "I don't want to hear you sing that. You're auditioning for a comedy character. Don't you have a comedy song?" And I said, "No, Mr. Rodgers, I don't, but I can sing Kansas City." And he said, "Well, why don't you sing that? You sing it in the show." I said, "I'd love to sing it for you." So I sang Kansas City. And he said, "Young man, can you dance?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Show me." And I had a dance routine that I did. And when I finished, he said, "Young man, is there anything you can't do?" I said, "No, sir, there isn't." And I got the job. I didn't read the script.
Oh, wow.
I was hired by Richard Rodgers after my singing and dancing. And it was a wonderful experience because my Aunt Eller was Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the West. So I can tell you what a friendship that was and how honored I was to be in her presence. And I loved working with Richard Rodgers. He only gave me one note. He said, "Leroy, when you do that, counting 20 gas buggies, put your hand down lower, go counting 20 gas buggies so I could see your face." I said, "Yes, sir." That was my note. And he signed my poster. He signed my score. And to quote Sally Field, he liked me. And God knows I liked him. And I could not get over the fact that every day when I looked at that man, that all of that music came out of him. It was extraordinary and amazing and all of those adjectives. It was just overwhelming, the music that came out of this man. And here I was working with Richard Rodgers. I mean, what a way to start.
But he's not the only composer you went on to have a wonderful professional and career and friendship with. You have a long relationship with Jerry Herman.
Yeah. And the next one was actually after it was Applause with Charles Strauss and Lee Adams. And then came Lorelei with Julie Stein. And then, of course, came Hello, Dolly with Jerry Herman. I mean, please. And it was just overwhelming to have worked with those men. And Cy Coleman, almost for Seesaw, but I worked with him on Sweet Charity. And we became friendly. And he had me perform a lot of events for him personally. And when I turned 40 years old back in the day, George Paul Roselle was opening a new restaurant called The Palace, which was the old Luchow's on 14th Street. And he said, "What do you want for your birthday press?" And I said, "I want Julie Stein, Cy Coleman, Charles Strauss, and Jerry Herman at the piano, and I want to sing one of their songs with them at the piano." And I got my wish. It was quite an experience that night. Then, here was this kid from Kentucky who dreamed about working on Broadway, and here I am sitting on a piano bench with Jerry Herman, Julie Stein, Cy Coleman, and Charles Strauss singing with them, playing the piano. I cannot tell you what a defining moment in my life that was.
Those moments when the young dreamer in us comes back out and we have to stop and go, "Oh, this is real life now."
Yes.
It's happening.
When I was on tour with Lorelei, one night after the show, we were going to a party. And Julie Stein stopped by my dressing room and said, "Leroy, are you going to this party?" I said, "Yes." She said, "You have a car?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Can I ride with you?" I said, "Of course." then Betty Comden and Adolph Green came by. Can I ride with you tonight? I said, yeah. Ernie Flatt came by, who was then the choreographer of Lorelei Among Four. And he got in the car, and there I was with Ernie Flatt, Julie Stein, Betty Comden, Adolph Green, driving my car to this party. I just slammed on the brakes, and I said, wait a minute. I can't believe that I'm in this car driving with Ernie Flatt, Betty Comden, Adolph Green, and Julie Stein. Another defining moment, because by then they were not the idols and the legends; they were my friends.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing in my entire career. It's not awards, none of that. It's the people, all of those geniuses, really, that I've had the pleasure of working with. That is my greatest satisfaction.
When was your first solo nightclub or cabaret act?
It was when I was doing Applause with Lauren Bacall. And it was at Brothers and Sisters on 46th Street. And that was the first time I did a nightclub act. And interestingly, at Brothers and Sisters, during that time, Barbara Cook was making her return to the entertainment world. And I was in the audience that night at Brothers and Sisters when she came out. I'm going to tell you this true story. Because people hadn't seen her for a long time and she was heavy. I mean, come on. We have to be honest about it. And she couldn't get down the aisle. The people had to get up to make a way for her to get on stage. And everyone was aghast at how much weight she'd gained. But then she opened up her mouth. And my dear, it was just a gift from God. Barbara Cook had the natural voice. She was trained. She knew what she was doing. But as an artist, you make a choice whether you do the musical phrase or the lyric. And that's a decision you make as an artist. Whatever that decision was, Barbara Cook made the right one. She knew when to sing the musical phrase and when to do the lyric. She was a genius and an artist beyond compare. Barbara Cook. I also saw Helen Gallagher return to Brothers and Sisters to do her nightclub act. She did one of the funniest openings ever. She came out and she said, it is so difficult when you do a nightclub act to select your first song. So I'm going to skip it, go to my second song. And she started singing, which was really, really funny. So there were a lot of brilliant people who came to Brothers and Sisters. But back in those days, Michael, what people used to do, I think it's because women weren't working back then as much. So when you went to the theater, afterwards, you were taken to a drink at a place, you went to a club act, or you had a late supper, you went out. New York was a late town then. People went out and they didn't get home until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's why the nightclubs were flourishing.
When the 11 o'clock slot was the slot to get in the rooms.
Absolutely. We don't have that anymore. And it's because everybody has to work. Everybody gets up going to work. But back then we had a lot of nightclubs, and you could go to the Carlisle, and speaking of the Carlisle, during Applause, Lauren Bacall said, I'm going to take you tonight to hear the greatest singer ever. She was Frank Sinatra's favorite singer, and her name is Mabel Mercer. So we went to the Carlisle. And Mabel Mercer came out, this elderly lady, sat down in a big chair and started singing, I've looked at clouds from both sides now. It's life's illusions. I thought, but then I got it, because once she started the storytelling, you went, oh my God. Another genius, by the way. Mabel Mercer.
Have you heard any of the early recordings of Mabel back in France at Bricktops when she still had this gorgeous soprano?
No.
I will send you a couple of audio recordings of her from that era.
Then another great artist was Julie Wilson.
Oh, Miss Wilson.
Julie Wilson came out in a club, and the thing about working intimacy in a club, the first good piece of advice I got was from Marge Champion. Because she said, Gower and she used to do a nightclub act. And she said, Leroy, the secret to nightclub performing You have to involve the audience.
Mhm.
They are your acting partner. You cannot look above them and lose yourself. You have to constantly keep their attention. And it's an art form to do. And it's not easy because we in the theater are trained to look out above and to create the illusion. Well, in nightclubs, you've got to do it right to the people and you've got to involve them. A brilliant example recently, I went to see a beautiful woman with a wonderful singing voice, and she had 5 or 6 musicians on the stage and a backup singer, and she was singing very well, but I felt like I was in a recording studio.
Mm.
It wasn't reaching me. And in her dialogue, she talked to the people, and everybody there knew her and were fans of hers, but she wasn't involving me. But she had it all. But that thing wasn't happening.
Mhm.
And listen, I'm just telling you the truth. Then I saw Patti LuPone 2 nights ago. Well, my dear, Patti LuPone comes out on a stage with just a piano.
Yeah.
And she starts, and she, like a light switch, when she did the song, she switched in to what the song was, and she acted it, and she acted it to the people. Anyone who ever wants to be in live performing, whether on a Broadway stage or a cabaret stage, if you want to get a doctorate, go watch Patti LuPone
Mm.
because you will learn more from her in one night than you will sitting in a classroom for 4 years because she knows how to do it. She knows she's relaxed. She's confident with herself. She's honest. She looks right to the people. It's like being a hooker. Ask what you want, you get plenty of it. And she knows what performing to an audience is. She also does that on the theater stage too. She doesn't walk out masturbating with another actor. She turns around and gives it to the audience. Not saying that she's not in the scene, she
Mhm.
is, but there is an art to performing on Broadway, and we're losing the technique
Mm.
because people are relying on the microphones and all this tricky vocal stuff, and they're not, and they also audition in small spaces and they rehearse in small spaces, and they're forgetting that there's an audience and you have to give it to them. You have to show them what it is, and it's a technique, but you don't have to give up reality and what you do as an intimate thing with a method and all of that. You can still do that, but you have to involve the audience. That's what cabaret does. So I'm telling you, I'm a better actor because I do cabaret. And it
Mhm.
also helps me in auditioning. It gives me material. And when I walk in to an audition, I think of it as doing my act in a cabaret, looking at
Mhm.
the people behind the desk, involving them in what it is I'm trying to say. So I think that the art of cabaret is very important to people who want to do stage work or people who want to succeed in life. I mean, walking in for an interview, for a job, of involving the person you're being interviewed by. And and the intimacy that you have is incredible. It's a great art form. And sometimes we have to put up with a person in the audience who's an asshole. That
Yep.
happens, but you have to learn to do that too.
Or the glass falling and breaking, or
Oh yeah, but usually nowadays, because there's so few cabarets, because it's expensive too,
Mhm.
you don't really get that person off the street. You get people who come in who are there to see you. So that kind of thing that used to happen in the old days doesn't really happen anymore. And it's because I work at 54 Below, and I've worked at Birdland,
Mhm.
and not doing my own act. I was there with the Gillette for one night, and I've been on the stage at Carlisle, not doing my own act, but I've been there as part of an evening. So I played those rooms, and it's wonderful that we have them. I just wish we have. Well, of course, now uh, the Green Room 42. I must
Mhm.
not leave them out, and then of course the Chelsea. What is the Chelsea
Table and stage.
table and stage? I haven't performed there, but I've been there. So we do have some venues. Now I'm sure I'm leaving some out. Please don't get angry with me, but I'm just talking about the ones that I know personally.
Mhm.
We have, in the old days, we had Freddy's and the Firebird and blah, 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 blah. So there are lots of places where we could go and perform. And that's the difficulty now when we do our acts. We do them for a couple of nights, then you can't come back and do the same act. You got to do a new one. It's very expensive, and you don't make that much money just working for the cover unless you can sell the place out. And a lot of clubs don't have built-in audiences. They usually come there to see the attraction. So,
Well, that's a shift that's happened. And you and I were talking about this a little bit before we went live with the audience tonight, was the change in the early to mid 90s where the room switched from the guarantee system to the pay to play system. And that's also then, I think, when press coverage of cabaret as an art form started to really dwindle. I mean, we had the Times covered cabaret a little bit until maybe, I think Stephen Holden was covering until 2013 at the absolute latest. But we lost the press coverage, so you're not able to pull an outside audience who doesn't already know the art form.
That's right. All we have is the internet, and the clubs advertise to their paying patrons who give them their emails, and then we put on Facebook our appearances so that our followers can come and see us. But it's still not having a guaranteed audience where it's full. It just depends on the time and effort. I could not. Some of my friends do make a living doing cabaret. I can't. I enjoy it. I like it. I like to do it, but I can't make a living doing it because I don't have the contacts or the agency management representation. So if there's anyone out there listening who have it, please give it to me, or if you're interested, let me know, because we don't have the venue to go out and do it.
What was the balance?
In the old days, when I went on tour, because Norman Keane booked the Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, I used to do the late shows at Mr. Kelly's on the weekend. And that was great because the Luntz, Alfred and Lynn, came to see me there with Carol Channing after Lorelei. It was a great experience the night having them there. They were just wonderful.
What was that balance? Because it doesn't exist as much anymore. Where, like, while you were doing Applause, you were doing Brothers and Sisters. While you were on the road with Lorelei, you were playing the rooms in those cities. What was that creative balance like?
Well, it was great because it gave you a chance, number one, to do something other than your show, and it kept your creative juices going. And then also, it's as I said, it's the intimacy. Now, to some actors, that's difficult to do, to go out and be that vulnerable where you expose and be friendly with people. And it's not something that necessarily comes naturally. To some people, yes. To others, no. It's something that you have to learn, and you learn by experience. And you just have to put your head. It's like being an actor. You have to assume those are your friends out there who paid money to come and see you. So just talk to them and give them what it is yours. But talk to them, not at them or above them. Talk to them. And it becomes easier the more you do. And there are some people who do it very easily, and there are some people who have a more difficult time. But the more you do it, the easier it is.
Lever, I think this is the longest we've gone in a Cabaret Conversations without showing a clip. So I know some of the people are here to see clips of you. So let's go to our first clip of the evening. Now, I promised you I would do an older clip as well. So this is one I chose. We were talking beforehand about our history of music and our likes. And so this is you in the height of your song and dance man. And one of my favorite videos of you that I've found on YouTube over the years.
Chap named Patrick John Malai. Once he sailed to the USA. His luck in foreign parts he thought he'd try. Now he's made his name and is a wealthy man. He put a bit away for a rainy day. So if you gaze upon the house of Patrick John, you'll find don't notice that goes on to say, if you're Irish, come into the parlor, and there's a welcome there for you. If your name is Timothy or Pat, so long as you come from Ireland, there's a welcome on the mat. If you come from the mountains of Bourne or Killarney's lake so blue, we'll sing you a song and we'll make a fuss. Whoever you are one of us. If you're Irish, this is the place for you.
I believe that was 1983 or 85 and a benefit for the Actors Fund.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I'm terrible on the years, but I do remember it's one of my favorite clips too, Michael. Thank you for showing that one. That was choreographed by Albert Stevenson, who was the husband to John Canner. And he did a lovely job, and it was Alex Cohen who produced it. And it was a special called Parade of Stars. It was all the people who played the Palace Theater. And it's a wonderful number and a quintessential song and dance thing. And I'm very proud of that. But it was done in one take. It was a live performance in front of a live audience in the Palace Theater. So I'm thrilled that we have that as a remembrance. And Alex Cohen was a wonderful man who involved me so much, and that was during the 42nd Street period, who involved me in all of his specials and the Tony Award shows that he used to produce. And I know that we were doing a Happy Birthday Hollywood out in Los Angeles, and it was a night of so many stars, all the MGM stars, it was wall to wall. You knew everybody in the place, and hundreds of them. And I said to Alex that night, I said, you know, Alex, I have to thank you for always including me in this because I don't have the name value and the universal recognition that most of the people on this program have. He said, well, Leroy, being a star is one thing, but somewhere during the evening, someone has to get up and do something, and that's why you're here. So I'm indebted to Alex Cohen. And by the way, my dressing roommate during that segment was Michael York. Ooh! Ooh! So that show has a lot of good memories for me. Thank you very much. I'll tell you all about it when I write the book.
I will look forward to the book. As your career has gone back and forth, what keeps bringing you back to wanting to do the nightclub thing, to wanting to do the cabaret thing?
Because I can do what I want to do, not what someone else has done that I have to interpret. It's my choice. And it's almost like doing group therapy, I swear to God. Yeah. Every time I do an act, it's wonderful to get it off my chest and to explain things and to have a reason. I think that all cabaret performers have to realize you just can't go up and say, here are a few of my favorite songs. You know, you have to have a purpose. It has to mean something to you, and there has to be a reason for you singing it. And something that the audience can identify with too, that you share the emotions of love, heartbreak, happiness, sadness, and you create the atmosphere. It's like being a storyteller, and you bring the audience into you. That's a great sense of power. And depending on the audience, it can be very satisfying. So I said it's like having a good session of group therapy, that we all sit together, we laugh, we cry together, and we share that personal human experience. Now, you can do that in a play, but you don't have, it's like doing improv. Anything can happen in conversation. You don't have to stick to the script. So you have an interplay with the people. You have a conversation with the audience. And I think that anybody who wants to be an actor should do cabaret and learn how gratifying that personal thing can do. I think it makes you a better actor. And I think it makes it easier for you to work with strangers. Because we go into a room with people we've never worked with, and suddenly we're singing and doing intimate things with them. Well, you do that same thing with an audience every night. And you get so it becomes easier, and it becomes gratifying to have that satisfaction of touching them or touching yourself with them.
It is that moment if you're doing the work in cabaret and you're sharing something from yourself, and you get that moment where you just hear that breath or that gasp, and you know that you're having that connection with the audience member, that could then take your performance in a different direction because you're open to receiving that.
Yes, yes. And we have so many brilliant people in the cabaret world who are wonderful singers, and you have to go in, and if you just go in for the music, you can enjoy that too, just with the singing and the music. But there has to be the successful cabaret people. There's a lot of wonderful singers in the world, but very few of them understand that you have to give it to the audience. And in cabaret, that's an essential. And it doesn't come easy. I make it sound like, it's not. It's a learned thing. But you have to come in and put yourself in that condition and be aware that you have to wait for what happens. Some things happen, and that's the joy and the fun. It's like, as I said, having interplay with another actor, doing improv. That's what happens a lot in cabaret. And there's some people who do it brilliantly.
I had a show a couple of years ago that some people stumbled in who I didn't know. It was three priests, and I was doing an Irish medley in the middle of the show, and the priest sitting front and center in that back room of Mama started singing along at the top of his voice. He had a couple of nice pours from the waiter at that point, I think. But it's that moment where anything can happen. You got to go with it.
Yeah, you're having conversation.
I mean, eventually I turned to him and said, they paid to hear me, but thank you. So we could keep moving on with the show.
I once had a guy who whistled during my show, and I went over and I said, now play that song again. I gave him the microphone. I said, now whistle, get it all out of your system. I said, now we've heard you whistle. We all know you can. I said, so now thank you. So now they're going to hear me sing. But I had fun with him, and he laughed.
Exactly.
But you deal with that not so much anymore because, Michael, people don't drink the way they used to. First of all, it's expensive.
Well, yes.
Especially in some of the clubs. But people, you don't deal with that anymore. People aren't, and there was a time when alcohol was the drug of its day. And everybody drank, like everybody smoked. People don't smoke anymore. And people drink, but they don't drink to the excess that people used to. People used to get drunk, and that doesn't happen as much. They still do, but not as much.
Well, I still work at the piano bar, so there's some nights I may I may differ in opinion with you on that one.
well, I can appreciate that. I get you.
How is your approach different, Leroy, as you're crafting your own intimate cabaret act, or as you are crafting a role for the musical theater?
Well, you bring your personal thing into a role too, at least I do. I know, I mean, as an example, I did a production of Company back in 1979 at the prestigious uh, Darien Dinner Theater. But we had a great cast. They were all New York actors: Lenny Wolpe, Paige
Mm.
O'Hara, Joanne Cunningham, to name a few. We had a first-rate New York bunch of actors. And I love Company. I saw it opening night originally because my friend Pam Myers and my friend Donna McKechnie were in it. It was one of the most exciting times in the theater. Pam stopped the show. Donna stopped the show, and they couldn't even start it after she finished her dance. And it was just incredible. So I love that show. I love the music. Stephen Sondheim's a genius. I don't need to say it. We all know it. And I couldn't wait to do the part. But this is what I'm talking about personally.
Mhm.
I read the script and I got Robert Johansson and Jim Coleman, who was the conductor, and Robert was the director. And I had a meeting with him and I said, now I want to tell you how I'm going to play this part. But you can't tell the other actors and they must never know. I'm not changing anything. But this is my interpretation of Bobby. Because my eventual husband, Bob, I was with then, and he was an advertising man who was gay, but you couldn't really be gay back in those days. You had a business to perform, so you put on the persona of a businessman. So that's what I thought Bobby was. He was a guy in business who couldn't really be gay and didn't really want to be gay. He wanted to be straight like everybody else. So what he did, he had all of these married friends that he kept separated from one another, and he would go with them and try to figure out, why can't I feel like this? Why can't I this? Because he loved women. He liked being with women. He liked but he just didn't want to have sex with them. So he could go out and be in a safe environment, enjoy the company of a woman, and try to figure out, looking at the man, how does he make this happen? How can I be like that and get that feeling? So he's studying these married couples and what he can do to have sex. If he has a younger girl for a one night stand, he can get through the sexual thing because he wants it so badly and he doesn't have to continue it. He can do it once. And that's what happens with the flight attendant. He goes to bed with her, but he's a nice guy. He wants her to feel good. So he says, oh, come on and stay. I like you. He's just being kind to her. But then when she says, okay, I'll stay, he goes, oh, God, because he's got to do that again. So he can have sex with women, but there's something stopping him. And what happens in the last scene with Joanne, who's older and wiser, he likes to get drunk with her. And he likes her sarcastic sense of humor. And he enjoys that with her. That's the thing he gets up. But of course, he doesn't have to go to bed. Then she confronts him and says, because she figures it out. And she says, Bobby, when are we going to make it? Now he thinks she's being funny. Oh, because they're drunk. They've been drinking. Joanne, yeah. And she said, no, when are we going to make it? And she confronts him with his sexuality. And in his drunkenness, I turned over the table as I left. And I pictured myself going into Central Park. And I looked up into the sky and I talked to God. And what I basically was saying, some man hold me too close. Some man hurt me too deep. Except you say somebody hold me too. I'm saying I want a man to love me. That's what I am. Now that's the way I played the part. I didn't change one thing. The cast never was discussion, but that's the way I played the part. Now, they can all say to the creator, say, we didn't write that. We did not talk to, well, I'm sorry, but that's the way that I interpreted for me. So yes, I think that when you play a character, you bring the personal thing in. It may not be you, but it has to be a statement. You want to make the same thing by playing the first openly gay character in a musical, Applause. I didn't think a thing about getting the part. I just wanted a job. I wanted to work with Lauren Bacall, for God's sake. I didn't think anything about him being gay. I'm gay. So, but why can't he be played as a normal person rather than doing all of that? I didn't have to do that, nor did Ron Field want that either. As a matter of fact, when he cast the role originally, he fought very hard against that. When he found out, unfortunately, the actor didn't have the humor necessary. And then they brought me in during rehearsal in New York. So I went out and I played it. But the thing is, I brought in my own personal observation, and I played the character after a hairdresser that was in Oklahoma at Lincoln Center. John Qualia is his name. And he was my image that I created for Dwayne, because I remembered his attitude and some of his vocal inflections. But at the same time, I brought my sense of a real person rather than a stereotypical limp-wristed, lisping person. When I made him real and honest. And I think that's why it worked. And I know it worked with Lauren Bacall, and it worked in the show. So yes, you bring your own personal thing to it. It's not me, but it's an interpretation of myself with the costume that I'm wearing. So it's like doing an accent. You do the accent, but it's your thought behind the accent. And that's the way I look at playing the character. Yeah, you bring a little bit of yourself. I know when I did La Cage aux Folles, when I played Maman, I brought a lot of my mother into that character, things that I would see my mother do. And I know that when I first did the part, and the director who put me in, and I'm sorry, Jim Pentecost, sorry, Jim, it didn't come fast enough. I had a senior moment briefly. Jim Pentecost was a very strong, assertive kind of, and he was Arthur's assistant. He was the stage manager. He put me into the show, which, by the way, I never got on. And I left 42nd Street in rehearsal for a week, and they put up the notice. But that's another story. But in playing the character, which I did a lot afterwards, I played many productions of it. Jerry Herman came to see me, and Jerry said, Leroy, you have to be a little more feminine because you're making him a little bit too you, that you just have to make him a little more feminine. And it was a good note for me. So I put it into, I made sure that my legs were always closed. And I relaxed a little bit with my gestures, but not losing I didn't turn him into a caricature. I didn't want to do that. So that's the way I played him. Then it became a reality for me. But when he's masquerading as Maman, then I was playing my mother. And that's my image. I always have an image for my characters. When I played Oklahoma, you'll laugh at this, but I swear to God, it was my image. My Will Parker was Doris Day doing Calamity Jane. I swear to God, that was my image. And you know what? Richard Rodgers liked it. So.
And there we go.
There you go.
On the flip side of that.
Richard Rodgers, it worked for me.
On the flip side of that, and putting your own personality into the musical theater, in the cabaret setting, bringing a lyric to a new meeting through yourself. What has been that experience for you?
Well, very much so. Like a song that I heard Steve Ross do for the first time, Old Friend. I immediately identified with that because I have a lot of friends that I'm very close to, and the lyrics of Nancy Ford meant so much to me. And when I sang that song, I thought of one particular old friend of mine, and he's no longer with us. But I remember him so vividly in the talks we used to have. So when you start, every time I've lost another lover, I call him my old friend. And I say, let's get together. I'm under the weather. Another love has come to an end. And I could get into that so easily. And that's what you do with the audience, because I know a lot of them have old friends. So you just share that emotion. And it's very therapeutic. What can I say? And you do that. Old love, new love, things of life, and also humor. You think of the funny songs that you can share with people, or your take on it. It's like, I know once I did a Cole Porter concert out at the John Drew Theater for Patricia Watt, and they asked me to sing a song, I've Got You Under My Skin. And I said, okay, I'll sing it, but I have to explain how I'm going to sing it. So I told the audience, I said, it's a well-known fact, we don't talk about it very much. Cole Porter was a homosexual, and he married, and he had a persona that he lived in. I'm sure he liked his wife very much, and he loved her as much as he could as a homosexual man, but he was a homosexual man. So think about him not ever being able to really express that feeling or that thing of knowing it's inside of you. So I said, think of what Cole Porter was feeling being a homosexual writing this song. I've got you under my skin. I've got you deep in the heart of me. So deep in my heart, you're really a part of me. I got say, you know you can't win. Lose your mentality, wake up to reality. But every time I do, just the thought of you makes me stop before I begin, because I've got you, meaning a man, under my skin. So that gives you a whole different way of looking at that song. So I think that's what we do in Cabaret, or we should be doing. We personalize a song so it has meaning to you and therefore to the audience, or at least enough to be able to translate it to a meaning to the audience. I know Patti LuPone did But You Don't Know Me so brilliantly. It's like I never heard that song before until she did. I've heard it as a pop song. I've heard a lot of people sing it, but boy, she went right to the heart of it. She did it simply with just a piano, and I was totally mesmerized and involved. Patty, I hope you hear me saying this, because I didn't get to say it to you that night, but boy, was it an epiphany, watching someone who really knows how to interpret and act a song. And Julie Wilson could do that. Mabel Mercer could do that. My God, let's talk about Marilyn May. How about Marilyn May, who is peaking at 94? How can you peak at 94 and do 2 shows a night? I saw her get up at the York Theater, do an hour and 45 minutes, didn't sit down, walked into the party afterwards and went around to every table. She is a miracle. I don't know how she does. And again, she's one of those ladies, she's an actress. She's also a singer, and she's a jazz person, and she sometimes chooses to emphasize the music. But having a voice and having that concentration, as I said, she's the miracle, marvelous Marilyn May. I got to tell you one funny story, though, about Carol Channing. Carol Channing used to always say, you know, of course, women peak at different times in their lives. You never know when you're going to peak. Some people peak when they're older. Some people peak when they're younger. For instance, take Shirley Temple. She peaked at 8. So Marilyn May is peaking at 94. Believe that. I'm 80. I'm 80. I know what I'm dealing with. I can't imagine doing 2 shows a night like Marilyn May and singing like that. I mean, she's
a masterclass anytime she steps on stage.
A PhD, baby. Watch Marilyn May and watch Patti LuPone. You'll learn more from them, as I said, than 4 years in a college. I swear to God. There are people who really are the examples. To also now, for instance, let's take some singers. Let's take Brian Stokes Mitchell. My God, he's attractive. He's sexy. He's got the voice. He's an actor, and he is so into the audience. He comes out and you want to be his new best friend. And then he will stand still and just rock you. The night I saw him, he said, I sang the song of Broadway backwards, where men sing women's songs and women sing men's songs. And he sang the Gershwin song, Someday He'll Come Along, the man I love. He did it simply, without making it. It was art. It was so, it blew me away. Here is a straight man singing a simple song, not a simple song, but singing it simply And my God, the effect was riveting. Then I saw Paulo Zot
Mm-hmm.
come out with a stage full of instrumentation. He had a spot to stand in, which was like 2x2. He couldn't move left, move right. And he's got this incredible operatic voice. And he says, I'm going to just sing for you all the songs that people like to hear. And I like singing them. Simple as that. And he started, and then you thought, now, how's he going to carry an hour and 15, 20
Mm-hmm.
minutes doing all of these big numbers like To Dream, The Impossible Dream, This Nearly Was Mine, Some Enchanted Evening, all of those big songs. Well, he did it. And I was in love with him by the end of the evening.
Mm.
I was ready to jump up and just grab him, whatever I could get hold of before they threw me out. But he never moved. He just stood there and with his God-given voice, but he knew what he was singing about.
Mm-hmm.
He just wasn't using his voice. He really got involved with the song and all this heavy-duty songs. You thought, well, after a while, this is going to get boring. It just got better and better and better. And then he did some Brazilian stuff, which is, his native thing to do. But God, was he incredible. So we have all of these people who do different things, and it's all cabaret.
Yeah.
It's all depending on the person doing it. Like you have Anne Hampton Callaway, either sitting at the piano or standing up, and she knows how to do it too.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you have just a piano or an orchestra or whatever it is, you just have to make that audience connection, have a purpose of what you're doing, and believe in what you're singing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they do. Various forms and ways of doing it, but all reaching the same conclusion.
And I think you bring us to, I can't believe I'm going to say this already, but what is always my last question of these evenings, and then we'll have another clip of you performing that will go into our audience questions.
Yeah.
But I think you've set up the last question perfectly, and that is taking in everything we've talked about this evening in a sentence, 2 sentences, a few words, however you want to do it. What is cabaret?
Cabaret is a personal artistic expression of the entertainer to you, the audience. It is an intimate conversation, which I used before. It's an intimate conversation, which you can't have in concert or in theater, but you can in cabaret. It's intimate conversation with the audience.
It's wonderful. We're going to go to another clip of you. And then when we come back, we'll go into our audience questions.
Okay. I'm fascinated to see what it is.
Love, look in my window. Love, knock on my door. It's years since you've called on me. How I would love hearing your laughter once more. So if you should ever be in the neighborhood, let's talk about old times. Love, pull up a chair. How I've missed your friendly smile. Love, look in my window. Love, knock on my door. Oh, love, come in and stay a while. Let me go, Ephraim. It's been long enough. For all these years, I've put out the cat, locked the door, made myself a little rum toddy. And before I went to bed, I said a prayer, thanking God that I was independent, that no one else's life was mixed up with mine. And then one night, an oak leaf fell out of my Bible. I placed it there the day you asked me to marry you, Ephraim. A perfectly good oak leaf, but without color and without life. And I realized I was like that leaf. For years I had not shed one tear, nor had I been filled with the wonderful hope that something or other would turn out well. And so I have decided to rejoin the human race. And Ephraim, I want you to give me away. Before the parade passes by, I'm gonna go and taste Saturday's high life. Before the parade passes by, I'm gonna get some life back into my life. I'm ready to move out in front. I've had enough of just passing by life. With the rest of them, with the best of them, I'm gonna hold my head up high. For I've got a goal again, I've got to drive again. I'm gonna feel my heart coming alive again. Before the parade passes by. Look at that crowd up ahead. Listen and hear that brass harmony growing. Look at that crowd up ahead. Pardon me if my old spirit is showing. All of those lights over there seem to be telling me where I'm going. When the whistles blow and the cymbals crash and the sparklers light the sky, I'm gonna raise the roof, I'm gonna carry on. Give me an old trombone, give me an old baton before the parade passes by.
That, of course, is the amazing Leroy Reams.
Now, what happened during that is that, number one, it's from a theater moment, Hello, Dolly. And by the way, that's the brilliant Alex Ryback. Piano. My partner in crime always. I love him to death. And such an artist. But anyway, I lose myself in the character. But being in the cabaret for the moment with Ephraim, that's the one focus. But then it comes to the audience when you rejoin the human race. So then I sing to the audience, look at that crowd up ahead, that's you, you know. So you bring it back to the reality of the room. So that's the transition that I make as an actor. And of course, it's very hard looking at myself now because I'm 40 pounds heavier. And it's not, you know, it's such a change from what we saw earlier, but I am who I am. So, you know, that's the way it is. And listen, I can still bring the feeling, and that's the important thing.
As I was doing my research for the first time we were going to do this evening, and I found that clip, I sat and cried watching it. You brought me to tears with that.
I'll tell you something very interesting, Michael. In doing La Cage aux Folles, we think of, you know, these Jerry Herman shows, and people don't think of them as deep, but that's Dolly and that's La Cage aux Folles. They're actually very deep,
yes,
meaningful things. And when I did La Cage, the best review I ever got was a letter from a woman, and she said, "Dear Mr. Reams, my son told me and my husband he was a homosexual, and we haven't seen him for 2 years. And we saw your performance last night, and we called our son today. Thank you." I could cry right now. That's the best you I ever got. And that's why when we do these things, especially La Cage aux Folles in that show, when he says, don't tell me that's your mother, and he says that's exactly who he is. That's a very powerful moment.
Mhm.
And songs like that, when you can make people feel that feeling in a show, and you do that in Cabaret too. We have those moments to share where people, you can change their lives or share their feelings. It's as I keep saying,
Mhm.
it's therapeutic. We're having group therapy, Michael.
Yeah.
Let's all cry and laugh. But it's very meaningful to me, and that's why I continue to do it. As they say in the song, it ain't for the dough.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Leroy, I'm so glad. Third time was the charm that we made this happen.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to invite any of our audience. If you would like, you can either turn your camera on and I will bring you in and you can ask a question, or you can send it to me in chat. I see a camera turning on, so I'm going to invite Meg Flather.
Leroy, we have
Yes,
a couple of mutual friends,
yes.
and I would love you to tell me a story about them. The first friend is my mother's best friend from high school, Tammy Grimes. The second friend is my adopted uncle, Steve Elmore, and my beloved Carolyn Marcel Elmore. So
Yeah.
you could tell me a story about the two of them. I loved what you had to say because I often am a snob when it comes to cabaret, and I don't think theater people do it as well. But you have proven me wrong, because
I'm glad.
what you have to say about taking the view of Dolly Levi into the audience and when you need to do that inspired me a great deal. And but anyway, back to my
Well, just to give you some theater legends I talked about tonight, Patti LuPone, Brian Stokes Mitchell. By the way, Anne Hampton Callaway is a theater gal, and so is her sister. And and even Jeff Harner, who hasn't done a lot of theater, not because he didn't want to, it just didn't happen. So we all kind of come from that theatrical background. Tammy Grimes' story. I love Tammy to death. I'll give you a story on Tammy. We were out of town doing 42nd Street in Kansas City, Missouri, on one of the hottest days forever. And Tammy called me up that morning, and on the news they were saying things like, "It is so hot out today, you can fry an egg on a sidewalk. So don't go outside. Keep your air conditioner on. It's unhealthy." Blah, 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 blah. And Tammy calls, she says, "Hello, darling. It's Tammy. Listen, honey, I want to go shopping at Rive Gauche today. Will you go with me?" I said, "Tammy, no one's going out in this heat." I said, "Oh, come on, darling. I want to go shopping at Rive Gauche." So I said, "Okay." So we get out, we're walking to the mall in this heat. And at this same time, Robert Goulet is doing Camelot at the Marriott Marquis, playing King Arthur. And so as we're walking toward the mall, Tammy turned to me and said, "Darling, what is the matter with Robert Goulet doing Camelot? What is the matter with him doing Camelot?" I said, "What, Cam? What are you talking about, Tammy?" She said, "Well, you know, darling, you can't go back. You can't go back." I said, "Can't go back?" I said, "He's in an air conditioner theater making 10% of the gross around here in the open air doing 42nd Street. I said, like, hey, sailor, honey." She said, "Darling, I never thought about that." I said, "Well, you should think about it." That's some of my conversation with Tammy. She would ask me to take her out. And one night it was to a black tie affair. I arrived at her apartment. She had forgotten about it and she was in her nightgown.
Yeah.
So, I have lots of Tammy Grimes stories, but I loved her to death. I really did. I could never tell whether Tammy was a good actress or a good singer or not. All I know is that I could not keep my eyes off of her. And when she came on, it was star quality.
Yeah.
And that's what she had. And that album that she put about, it's the Irrepressible or the something Tammy Grimes. It's like a play on the the Unsinkable, and it's a wonderful album that if everybody doesn't have it, they should get it, because that is Tammy at her best, with beautiful orchestrations. And Steve Elmore, wonderful, wonderful man from 42nd Street. And we were close. And Carolyn, we visited when I went to Florida. They always came to see me, and we always got together. And all the wonderful things Steve did, Dames at Sea. Steve was the dependable leading man.
Yeah.
It's always there. He could sing, and in company, he was solid. He never missed a show, and he was just like Jerry Orbach. They're very similar, those kind of guys. They're the backbone of the theater, people like that.
You're a marvel. I'm going to watch this episode again because you had so much to say, so much to teach us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Meg.
My pleasure.
Carolyn, I see your camera's on. Did you have something? I want to add you in. You need to unmute, darling.
Oh, wow. Nobody's ever said that. You need to unmute, darling. Leroy, when you were talking about having Betty and Adolph and Julie Stein and Ernie Flats in your car, that's how I felt when I was driving you on December 10th out to East Nowhere. And when you were telling me stories, and we went off and sang together, and I made a commitment to myself that I'm either going to kidnap you and take you on a long, long trip so that I can hear stories.
Like Thelma and Louise, honey, let's hit the road.
Honey, without the driving off the cliff at the end, but just figuratively.
We're not going to do that.
But what I thought to myself, you told me a couple of stories that are so funny that I have told friends, but they also make me spontaneously combust on the street when I'm walking my dog. I just lose it. But the thing is, when I watch you perform, I also cry a lot. I find myself being brought to tears. And I think there's a longing for a time amongst all of us here. Michael, maybe not, you might be a little too young, but where we remember a time without cell phones, social media, the ability to watch something over and over and over again, the ability to access an experience on a screen and see it again and again and again, so that before all that, there was a focus. There was a focus where people would go to a performance and they would pay such close attention because they couldn't access it over and over and over again and have pictures of it. And there's a longing for that because there is a attention to detail. And there's an ability to get right to the heart of the matter that I think a lot of younger performers don't have. And it's striking and it's moving. And you're full of it.
Thank you.
And that drive was very special. And I will kidnap you. You choose the beach or the mountains and we'll go.
Hopefully we'll have another reason to do it, Carol.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
Leslie, I see your camera's on and you're waving at me, so let me add you in.
Yes, I've been to every single one of these cabaret conversations because I am so fascinated with stories and storytelling. And I wrote so many quotes down from you. And I also cried in that last, clip. That was incredible. I'm still moved by it. And please write the book, but record the book. I was like, I could just listen to you tell stories forever. And I think you could, you could just have like a storytelling hour with, you're just amazing. And I love that you said that I didn't find it. It was in me. Yeah. I didn't find show business. It was inside of me the whole time. And I do think that's how we collaborate with our spirits, but you are a marvel. I totally agree. Please, I can't wait to see you perform live, but if anything, I could just listen to you talk forever and tell these stories.
I have 80 years to talk about. And the reason is I'm not that intelligent or that bright. I'm really
You're smart.
No, I've gone through the institutions. I've learned, but I have a decent memory, and I've appreciated what life has brought me, and I've learned from doing, and I think that's the thing. And also, I've been blessed by the people I've worked with that and also it's being as honest as you can be without hurting someone's feelings. My relationship with Lauren Bacall lasted because I was always honest. Sometimes she didn't like it, but she respected it. And that's what my friendships with most of these people were based upon. I was in awe of them, but as I also wanted to share, it's like Julie Stein. I could not keep my hands off Julie Stein, not sexually, but he was like a teddy bear. And I always had to have my arm around him or hook his arm or hold his hand because he was so lovable. And this music that used to pour out of him was amazing to me. And he thought I was a sight reader, and I'm not. I know a note goes up and down. I'm not an idiot, but I have a good ear. And with Julie's things, and Jerry Herman, by the way, and Charles Strauss, and Cy Coleman, I'll go down the list, all of them. When the note goes up, it goes up to a place that sounds right in my ear. So that's why I can sing their songs. And Julie called me up one day, and he would have me do recordings of backers auditions for shows. And he was musicalizing Treasure Island. And he said, Leroy, it's Julie. Hey, listen, can you come over and do something for me? I don't want to put up with a fucking kid. You know, can you sound like a little boy? I said, sure, Julie. He said, you come over, you play the little boy. It'll just be easier. So I go over to him, to his office there at the Mark Hellinger, went upstairs, and he said, now, here's the song. I said, well, Julie, you do it first so I can hear it. You do it. And he would play it. Well, it made sense. And I would get it, and then I would sing it. He said, I can't believe you. God, you're such a good sight reader. I'm not. It's just that he's a good songwriter, because when the note goes up or down, it makes sense in my ear. And I know at that 40th birthday party, I always wanted to sing All I Need Is the Girl, because when I was a young guy, that's the role that I thought I would be until I saw the show. And I realized that Louise comes in at the end of the song and kind of takes over the song. Didn't like that part of it, but I liked the song. So that night with Julie at the piano, I did All I Need Is the Girl. And so, and of course, the audience screamed, and Julie said, come on over here, sit down, sit down. This was unrehearsed. I go over and I sit down, and he said, come on, let's give him another song. I said, what do you want to do, Julie? He said, I want you to sing People. He said, Barbara's ruined it for all the women. No one can sing it, but a man can still sing it. You sing People tonight. And he started playing People, and I started singing, sitting next to Julie Stein. I don't know how I got through the song, because I cried so hard, because I thought, here I am sitting with Julie Stein. He's playing People, and I'm singing it with him. I mean, it's like I stepped out of my body. That was the kind of evening it was. And then I did, with Charles Strauss, I did, of course, Applause, the song. And with Cy Coleman, I did It's Not Where You Start, It's Where You Finish. And with Jerry Herman, I think I did something from Dolly. And just having them at the piano was just overwhelming, overwhelming. Because all those nights I spent in Covington, Kentucky, in the dark living room with my cast albums, playing these songs and staring at the albums, hoping one to be on Broadway and to work with these people, and then suddenly to be there with them, overwhelming, just overwhelming. And my first Broadway show was Carnival. Jerry Orbach, Kay Ballard, who became lifelong friends. I'm not talking about professional acquaintances. I mean eating with them, going out with them. That's the thing that I am so proud of, and I'm in total awe. So the thing is, that's what I remember. So, I mean, listen, when people talk about you people, you have such egos. Maybe I do, but it's related to those people. So there we go.
Oh, so lovely. I can't believe we are at time this evening, but we are at time already. It has flown by. A little bit of housekeeping before we say goodbye. The next edition of Cabaret Conversations is the final Monday of this month, actually, and I will be joined by Faith Prince. She'll be followed in February with
Graduate. I love her.
She'll be followed in February by Ari Axelrod, and then Anita Gillette will be with me in March. It's a lovely lineup. Please, if you haven't signed up for those, but
I'll tell you something about Faith. I wanted to do Hello Dolly with Faith Prince. I wanted to direct her, and Jerry Herman wanted her too, and we never got to do it. It's a regret of my life.
Oh, she'll be wonderful in that role. Leroy, I can't thank you enough for tonight. You, as the ladies have said, you imparted so much wisdom to us, so much care. And I think we are all now waiting for your audiobook so we can cherish these stories and keep
Send me a
hearing them.
producer, someone who wants to do it. I'm ready.
Well, I'm sure we'll find people. Carolyn and I will start talking and combine resources to make it happen. Thank you for joining us, and all of our audience, thank you for joining us. And we will see you at the next edition of Cabaret Conversations from 92nd Street Y. Have a great night, everybody.
Goodbye.